And it looks like we're getting going here.
Yeah, seems so.
All right, Dmytro, I have to appreciate your you have the same haircut and beard as I do. It
Even
seems
though I didn't choose that.
exactly. Nor did I. Nor did I. I think a life in cybersec does this to people.
That's for sure. Join cybersec forces, go bold in the first year. That's just how it goes.
Exactly. That's how you can tell somebody new. If they're new in the field, they still have hair. And
Yeah,
beards are often a requirement. Here, when I formed our DevOps team, there was you had to have a beard in order to be on the team. Like
of
you couldn't
course.
even pass the hiring. That was just part of the prerequisites during interview.
Yeah, and gray lines under your eyes, they're
Yeah,
like they're a requirement. That's how
exactly.
that's how you actually understand whether the person is actually a good specialist in what they do.
Absolutely.
If you know how to sleep well, that's
You
not for you.
probably don't
You're not
belong on the
fit.
team.
Absolutely. You're the weakest part of the chain.
Yep.
That's not gonna work. Okay. So I think we're rolling, even though I can still not see it live on LinkedIn.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
trying.
it may have a little bit of a lag there, but we'll keep going forward.
No, we're
Yes,
actually live.
exactly,
That's very
exactly,
cool.
exactly. Yeah, so
Okay.
we're here to talk about the 5 elements of highly successful DevSecOps. We're
Yeah.
both coming from a DevOps and security background, so we are discussing this really from a security angle. So
Yep.
I know DevSecOps has a lot of pieces to it other than security. Everything from cloud infrastructure to networking, etc., identity management. But we're coming at it from the security angle in this discussion.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I'm honestly very happy to have you here, Art. It's a huge pleasure for me. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay. So without further ado, we're gonna touch some very cool topics right here. We're gonna not only give you the points, but make it to the level where you can actually turn it into a really working framework. So we're gonna be talking about what it is for a DevOps teams to become DevSecOps teams, a reality check. We're gonna be talking about 5 elements of really successful DevSecOps, and then we're gonna give you some summary of what it is, and you'll be able to ask questions. And the Art is gonna be actually the person who will be able to give you a lot of value for this one.
Thanks. Great. Yeah, so I'll introduce you guys to Airiam. I'm from Airiam. I lead incident response and cybersecurity at Airiam. Formed DevOps teams and DevSecOps teams here at Airiam. But Airiam is a combination of MSPs and MSSPs that came together with dedicated incident response and recovery. So Airiam itself was founded in 2021, but we were made up of MSPs and MSSPs that have been around since, for 20 years before that. We have over 75,000 hours of incident response, especially in ransomware and recovery. We have done over 100 incidents, and they're usually front page incidents working alongside major partners. And we've rebuilt and re-architected over 25,000 servers, workstations, and networks.
Okay, cool. I'm Dmytro Shevtsov from UnderDefense Cybersecurity. We specialize in cloud protection in providing managed detection and response, along with proactive threat hunting, which actually not only allows discovering threat, but 0 days as well. So for the last 6 years, we've made our path to be recognized worldwide by reputable resources and clients. And first of all, as an MDR platform, Notice is one of the most popular in the industry, and our team of security engineers, analysts, specialists in the field, along with the technologies built in-house, actually, is our great pride, especially by reducing the reaction time to critical incidents down to 20 minutes. So if you haven't had a chance to make up your own mind, understanding on what UnderDefense is about and how we deliver our work, feel free to visit our website and check the materials. It's crazy how you can simply go there and try the Maxi platform by registering for free on our website. Okay, so the first question we got for all of you guys, it's something we really want to understand about you, is what's your current role in the company?
Absolutely, yeah. Are you an engineer or are you a leader?
Yeah, and we're going to give a lot of context for both, but
Mhm.
anyways, it's still very interesting. Okay, we got DevSecOps right now. Very cool. So I think we can start on the topic itself because we ain't got much time. So yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, I think we could talk about this for hours and hours, but the and of course anybody is feel free to hit us up after this if we run out of time and ask any questions you have. But yeah, the common evolution is, you have a DevOps team and then you realize that hey, security is still our bottleneck. Security is having to test everything after the fact. It's still a problem. So let's shift left and move it into our DevOps team and
yeah.
bring a couple security people, maybe one, maybe two security architects or security engineers into the DevOps team and call it DevSecOps. And so now you've been promoted to DevSecOps. What does that mean? What does that change for you?
Yeah, but it's not just the change of title,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of stuff to address in the first place. And we're actually going to be talking about the issues by addressing which, with the targeted strategies, which is important. And leveraging the right tools and practices, you can build a robust DevSecOps. And first one being the skills gap. It's one of the primary obstacles that you're going to encounter is a skill gap. And security expertise is often limited and not very evenly distributed across the team. And with the technological advancements and evolving threats, of course, finding and retaining professionals with the right blend of development and operations and security skills, it can be very challenging.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And as far as the breadth of what you have to know, as far as just a security expert, it's wider than really anybody can understand anyway. So, this is really some bits and pieces from like NIST CSF, but these are all really things that you are responsible for when you're in a security operations team. And when you transform into a DevSecOps team, really those don't go away. These are still your problem. And you're like, what am I going to do? How am I going to
Absolutely.
really do all this? Especially when there's only one or two of you on the team that are really security focused. There's a lot of leveling up the rest of the team that has to happen, and really a lot of a lot of everything in order to get your hands around this.
Yeah, and one thing is having a person in the team who's really skillful. And another thing is actually having the right track of what's going to happen and what you're going to implement because you need to really bridge the gaps in the knowledge base, and you have to invest in comprehensive training programs that upskill the existing team members in security practices and tools. So this is what's going to happen in the first place. And I'd also like to talk about the security debt, which, much like technical debt, our clients and people whom we're talking to right now, they absolutely familiar with this thing. And it basically accumulates when security issues are deferred or inadequately addressed. And in the rush to deliver the features, which is the main idea of every development company or any development center, um, to deliver the features, quickly update, security concerns, are often pushed aside, leading to vulnerabilities that can accumulate over time.
Absolutely. So if you're a DevSecOps team for a enterprise, you may have 150 applications that you're worried about, in addition to the infrastructure that it runs on. You may have 1,000. You may have more. New projects are constantly coming down. You're always having to ship code and new features. What's happening with the stuff that's already been deployed? How is anyone recursing through that to check it for that security debt? And what security debt have you acknowledged and just maybe put on the risk register and everybody signed off on and is out there in the wild and that is a vulnerable application or just something you haven't gone back to in the last 4 years? Those are all sitting there with really nobody managing that security.
Yeah, and to manage security debt effectively, one of the things that you really need is to prioritize the security from the very start. And this is one of the main topics about DevSecOps implementation, is when you need to introduce it as early as possible, at the early stages. And speaking of the earliest stages, one of the things right there is lack of security automation. This is a very important thing. Without automation, maintaining security across the continuous delivery pipeline becomes, daunting task. Manual security checks are very time consuming and prone to human error, leading to potential, gaps in coverage. And to overcome this, it's actually essential to integrate security automation into CI/CD pipeline
Mm-hmm.
and automated tools for vulnerability scanning, code analysis, compliance checks. To provide continuous real-time feedback and ensure that security issues are identified and addressed promptly. And this feedback loop is actually going to really work out really well.
Definitely a core piece of what DevSecOps is getting that into that CI/CD pipeline. I'd want to make sure that the DevSecOps team is doing something to manage that after it's through the pipeline and really, out in the wild and is continuing. It's still your responsibility, but there has to be some kind of ongoing management of that security and monitoring of that, and vulnerability checking going forward in that application lifecycle, far after it's deployed in the wild. All right, let's
Sure.
let's talk about really kind of the common vision behind DevSecOps here.
Sure. So at its core, DevSecOps is about integrating security into every stage of the DevOps lifecycle,
Mhm.
and it's not just a technical shift; it's a very much cultural shift
Mhm.
that ensures security, is not an afterthought, but a foundational aspect of the development, deployment, operational processes. And the goal is to create a unified approach where development, operations, and security teams collaborate closely to actually build secure and high quality software efficiently.
And ideally, you're infecting the whole company with this culture. It should, infect your finance teams, your HR teams, everything. Everybody should really understand really that we're trying to shift left everything. And it can really revolutionize the culture of the company and improve
Yeah.
security as well. But yeah, as far as the DevSecOps team, it's really shifting left, putting as much of this automation into code as possible. The ideal is that you don't have a full security team internally. The idea of a DevSecOps team, is that you have that as your core security team as well as development team, and build and release team that is getting things into production and managing it so that you don't have disparate teams. The whole point of it was not to have a siloed team. So,
Yeah.
exactly. So I know some companies still have a security team, and it's almost like an internal MSSP then. So it's almost like you're outsourcing security to an internal team from that DevSecOps team. Yep,
Yeah, I think we can actually. Yeah, we actually see the right slide right here. You just started talking about the siloed, and
exactly.
this is something that can break everything down because you need to make the security not only priority of your team. You need to make it a priority of the whole team that's involved in this. So it's not only the DevOps team that's involved. It's every single part of the production cycle.
Absolutely. You want it all smashed together.
Sure, sure. And basically speaking, we are running into the DevSecOps Manifesto that we have right here.
Yeah, yeah. So the DevSecOps Manifesto, just like the Agile Manifesto, where you have, really a response to a negative thing with a positive thing. So leaning in instead of saying no, etc. So it has that same feel as the Agile Manifesto, but the idea is to get that automation in, to be proactive, to
Yeah.
share and be collaborative, and to be, really the same concepts of DevOps principles and agile principles, but applied to integrating security in.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the questions that I would like to ask you guys right away is, do you currently have separate organizations, or do you actually are building or already having the DevSecOps in place? What's your current stance? Because we'd really love to hear questions from all kinds of teams right here.
Hmm.
It's really interesting to hear what you've already been through. Maybe you have some experience with this. Be
Hmm.
sure to show your experience, showcase it, and let us know what you think and what you've been through. Because a lot of guys who are listening to this right now, they're gonna to encounter the issues that you have already been through,
Hmm.
and building it is not as easy. Is It's definitely a huge amount of job to do.
Hmm. Absolutely. It's really hard to put that team together and get it right. So that's really why we're trying to conquer a lot of these cultural problems and a lot of the team building problems around it, and making sure that those skill gaps are closed, especially a large corporation that's been through a lot of mergers and acquisitions. You may have three different security teams. You may have four different IT teams. You may have, a DevOps team, and really trying to get all of that together is a key problem. And if you think about what really DevSecOps is trying to solve, is the fact that there's a separate team for security. The fact that DevOps will push some code into production, and then security is having to fix it afterwards or having to secure it afterwards. And, so the idea of DevSecOps is really to get that into the beginning here. So, but just the complexity of organizations, it's expected that everybody is going to be a mess at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I can say actually that Charisma already have DevSecOps. That's very good. Please be sure to share your experience and some of the ideas about the key
Mhm.
points, key factors of what you've been through when you have been building it. And we've passed through one of the five key elements that, in our opinion, very much brings foundation for building the DevSecOps. The cultural shift and technical shift. Let's switch to the second element, which is tools and automation. And of course, this seems to be very much obvious, but there is a huge variety of tools available, and controlling and picking the right tools. That's a huge question mark right there.
Mhm. Absolutely, and orchestrating all these and getting them working together is always a challenge. If you were to grab all these tools right now and just say, okay, we're gonna build a new CI/CD pipeline or integrate them with your existing pipeline, and let's say you didn't have any of these in place, it'll take a while. And when we're trying to set up our deployment pipelines, really getting all the testing in place at the right points, and figuring out what to do with the results of them and really how to handle the results can be a problem. For instance, your SaaS tool will often pull up a lot of, a ton of findings, a ton of vulnerabilities in code, but you may look at it and say, okay, half of these are false positives, and so you're having to
Yeah.
tune that, and then you run your DAS tool, and it's coming up with some findings too, and so you have to sort through those and find out what's real, and then and really get into a rhythm of that and really establish what the baseline is for those. And then when you're doing some IaaS, and you're doing some actual like interactive testing or maybe some inline pen testing of your application and running some OWASP tools against your
Yeah.
application while it's up and running, you'll find things then. So really, do you stop your build, and or do if it's SaaS, if it's before build, do you stop your build then Usually, yeah. Until everything you've accepted everything, or gone and fixed everything. But after build, are you going to stop deployment if you find certain vulnerabilities, and then where what amount of vulnerabilities is acceptable, because there's
Yeah,
always bugs. You're always releasing stuff with bugs. You're having to ship code. There's no perfection when you're deploying. So where do you choose your stop points? And so you're never going to be able to fix everything, but you can see from this graphic that there's just a ton of tools, and they're
yeah,
all super important. You need to be able to do application monitoring and security monitoring. You're going to need to be able to do chaos engineering. One of the ideas of resilient programming and really is to do chaos engineering and really uh, not only attack your environment, but create chaotic events in your environment and see how your application will work. So all of these are huge, and some of these, like, are amazing tools, and some of them are expensive and are really worth putting in your pipeline. So these are mostly these are all enterprise tools from what I'm seeing here, but no, there's a few open source, but there are open source equivalents of most of these, but those, of course, will take some more tuning and some more, you have to manage that application then. So when you've created
hmm
that, when you've deployed that into your system, now you have to manage this other thing. So there's a lot of things to manage in order to get this set up in your AppSec tool, your pipeline. And I'm sure that those of you who have a DevOps situation right now already have a pipeline with some amount of testing in here. But already here we're talking about a lot of things that will could slow down deployment, could slow down could slow down your process and cause you to have to reanalyze what you've put in the wild.
yeah. And you've already touched on the topic of how it's important to actually orchestrate all of this properly.
Mhm.
And what I thought about is that it's one thing to identify the gaps, to identify the areas for improvement, which is definitely cool. You have to start with it. This is very cool, but you also need to ensure the practicality and usability. Automation tools and all the processes, they need to be practical and user friendly. And by involving users in the validation process, you can ensure that the tools are not only functional but also fit seamlessly into their daily tasks.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's what Maxi is doing here is really showing that we are able to really with chat ops with your team, um, give a real-time response to problems, and
Yeah.
without having to dig through logs, without having to go and find a problem. It's bringing it to you in Slack or in Teams.
Yeah, and I think we can actually move to the next part of the presentation, which is the cloud and about AWS security. This is the part where, the huge shift towards cloud-based development, storage, everything. It has been huge,
Mhm,
and it's still going. A lot of um, a lot of businesses are actually moving towards cloud.
mhm,
And if in the past it has not been such a huge target, nowadays it is,
mhm.
and you need to address this properly. So I would really want to hear what you can say about this. This is a very interesting topic.
Absolutely. And I see a question in the chat that I'm going to try to fit in here as well at the same time, just because it's really pertinent to this. But yeah, we're talking about AWS in this slide. I'm really strong with Azure as well, but GCP, Azure, AWS really doesn't matter. All of them have, similar controls. And so, really whatever your organization is using. The idea is, and if you're using a multi-cloud environment, which probably most of you are at this point, you have some services in Azure, you have some services in AWS. You're going to have to use a multi-cloud strategy as well. So this is another layer in addition to this, in order to manage your accounts and your subscriptions and everything. So billing wise, obviously there's a lot of advantage to centralized management and to a multi-account strategy, whether it's dividing by business units, by project, whatever your strategy is there. But build a multi-account strategy, and usually that adds some clarity to what you're doing, but also grouping everything in organizational units, so that you can apply then your service control policies to them. And so you want to be able to set up your IAM principles, your defaults really for your organization. Those of you who are in DevOps are already used to doing this. This is part of your everyday work, but it's a lot of work if you're doing it account by account. And really, you want to centrally manage that with AWS Control Tower.
Yeah.
But once all of that is done, you're creating a ton of log data now. A lot of identity data about access from your developers, from your administrators into the environment. You're creating log data from applications, output from functions, access to environments. So there's a lot of things, access to keys, that are a lot of things that are getting triggered and creating log data in AWS. And our typical development team or our typical DevOps team is not looking at those unless there's something specific you're looking for. I'm looking for a bug. I'm going to dig into that. I'm looking for, why is this application responding this way? Then I'll look into the logs. But for the most part, those logs are just being generated and no one's actually looking at it. And
Yeah.
and so it actually causes the security engineers on the DevSecOps team are probably focused on shipping new stuff. They're not really looking at this log. So
Yeah.
so one of the questions that somebody in the chat asked is, where does CSPM fit into this? And then same question for SIM. So SIM is really
Yeah.
where you want to start dumping a lot of your log data into that, and so that it can be analyzed. But CSPM is really going to tell you your cloud security of your infrastructure in Azure, AWS, etc. So taking Wiz or Orca and connecting it to that cloud environment and seeing, okay, how is it secured? Do I have any buckets misconfigured? Is IAM screwed up on these infrastructure pieces? How are these functions configured? But it's looking for common security problems. So I think it's a core thing to use along the whole life cycle of your environment, not just at development time. But over time, somebody from help desk, somebody may tweak security settings in order to solve a problem with a cloud resource, and without continually monitoring that, you have no insight on that. So using tools to verify and validate your cloud security is crucial. And really, I'm talking about configuration management there. Managing and monitoring the configuration drift of your cloud resources.
Yeah. Absolutely. And actually, an important part of this, speaking generally, because we're speaking not only about the technical shift, but also the mind shift. I'd like to switch to the next slide. It's a continuous learning and improvement because in current realm, I would say, cybersecurity, continuous learning and improvement are, they're not just important, they're crucial for maintaining robust security posture. This not only involves regularly updating your knowledge, practices, it also involves updating the tools based on the new insights that you have. The threats are emerging, and the best practices are also evolving too. So you need to really look into the data that you have and base your decisions on that. And you need to really leverage threat intel, really leverage it, and it will provide you with valuable insights. Basically speaking, latest trends, tactics, techniques, and procedures. used by attackers. So you stay informed, you can faster identify the patterns, which is important in order to respond. And this way you can actually enhance your response strategies. And basically speaking, from your experience, what would you say about this one? So
Yeah,
maybe something about enhancing the response strategies based on the threat intel that you had access to.
absolutely. So a lot of organizations just ignore threat intelligence. They're just, in a reactive mode. So I'm learning from attacks then. So it's still continuous learning. You get attacked and you learn, okay, what gaps do I need to close? Why am
Yeah.
I getting attacked? And then you're fixing it. So that kind of feedback cycle and loop is super important. It's a core part of DevOps, core DevOps principle anyway. That second way of DevOps is fast feedback loops. But we want to be proactive. And if you're going to try to really shift left and be proactive, you want to know what those attackers are doing before you get attacked. So, other people in your industry, other people that are doing what you're doing are getting attacked. And so there's threat intelligence that's being gathered saying, okay, everybody in the finance industry is getting these kind of attacks from this group of threat actors that are doing these things. Maybe we should proactively prepare our infrastructure and our apps for that kind of attack. That's what threat intelligence really tells you.
Yeah. And I love this one. I absolutely love this one.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's you can look as prepared as you want, but really, if you're not using threat intelligence, you may be really kind of naked and really unprepared for the attack when it happens.
Yeah, and this is actually where utilizing an attack simulation can really be helpful, because it involves conducting a very controlled simulation of what's going to
Mm.
happen in case of a real attack. Of course, it's not a real attack. Of course, it's not going to be, the full scale real attack. Of course, hackers have much more time to prepare if they are really targeting against you, or they would have some information they have already got from elsewhere to start with. This
Yep.
is legit. Anyways, simulating attacks for ongoing improvement is one of the keys, because first you need to test the defenses that you already have. As we already mentioned, you need to identify the gaps properly.
Mhm.
uh, you also training a skill you're going to use to actually respond properly. And you're refining your security posture basically. And once again, this is going to be important for leaders of the teams, because it's one thing to know what you're going to do. It's one thing to have a real plan. It's one thing to have proper tools in place. And we're basically every time we're saying about this triad of tools, people, and processes. All of this is important, but um, there's many demands from legal standpoint, and most probably your organizations falls under certain regulation, certain compliance, and this is actually going to be forcing you towards making certain steps.
Yeah, since most people understand that the more you practice something, the better you're going to get. So, if I want to learn guitar and you practice, a half hour every day, you're going to get better. You're going to be better at what you do. So in that continuous learning and those feedback loops, the more you practice attacks, the more you practice your response, the more you practice, patching systems in the wild, the better you're going to get. A lot of people, once you've released an app in the wild, you're really kind of afraid to adjust it, especially if it's that technical debt, that security debt. Let's say this legacy app under your team, is a 15-year-old application running on an end-of-life operating system. Everybody's afraid to touch it. You've written all kinds of integrations with your DevSecOps team for that application, but everybody's afraid to touch that application. That sounds like a perfect thing to practice your DR with, to
Yeah.
practice your practice incident response with, practice your vulnerability management with, and putting in those mitigating factors in. So those very things that you're kind of afraid of are really the things you should be practicing with in your team, because that'll build those reps of, okay, we've already had to fix this application. We know how to redeploy this. We know how to get this fixed in an incident. So that kind of learning and that process knowledge, of course, your tools are going to evolve as you go because you'll learn what you need to fix and build. But that understanding is really key to being successful in DevOps and DevSecOps. It's really that constant learning and trying to build more organizational kind of understanding there.
Yeah, sure. You're basically taking the actionable insights and utilizing them for your changes. And what's important to understand here is this is something that you really need to learn how to translate as a technical specialist to the leadership. Is that the changes are going to be iterative. It's not going to be, every step of the way is going to take some time. And the changes based on the actual actionable insights that you are having based on threat intel that you have acquired, they're going to be iterative. It's not going to be like, fast switch from DevOps to DevSecOps. Of course, we've already talked about, the mind shift,
Mm-hmm.
the mindset shift, but it's still the experience and the knowledge from all the threat intel you're going to take. It's going to be in iterative way, you know continuously applying lessons learned from the threat intel, from the simulations, to refine and enhance. This is what's going to happen in real life. And you really need to learn how to translate this to the leadership, because they really want to see the results, and you're the ones that are going to be responsible for actually delivering those.
Mm-hmm. Now, the fifth element really is keeping in-house versus outsourcing.
Yeah,
And really, when we're thinking about DevOps, DevSecOps, if you're really thinking about really what one of the core things behind the DevOps movement was theory of constraints. And so Eli Goldratt had the goal that really kind of launched that theory of constraints in it. And so really, we want to uh, you know remove security as a constraint there. And you know when we talk about security, there, like we mentioned before, there's a million things in there, everything from compliance to certificate management to credential management to monitoring and pen testing and red team, purple teaming. There's a lot of things that are involved in this. So what
absolutely.
pieces what pieces can you actually do with your team, and what needs to be outsourced?
Yeah,
What are not going to be core to what your team does? Now, we were just talking about how, really everybody on the team needs to have a security mindset. Your most hardcore API developers, your front end developers, everybody on the team really needs to uh, have a really, security should be first in their mind, but beyond that, what kind of people do you need on that team? And your traditional DevOps engineers as well as security engineers who kind of are becoming DevOpsy, or um, you know, your traditional development types, your QA and test engineers, your operations engineers, and your security champions. And when I talk about the security champions, I always talk about like your architects, the people that are really kind of leading security, and those are the ones who are usually kind of shouting the loudest about it. And a lot of times those are compliance leaders as well, although compliance usually lags behind security significantly by years. So you don't want security driven by compliance. You want security to be miles ahead of compliance. And your SRE, your site reliability engineers, these all are kind of combined in kit bash and really should meld within that team. And one of the core pieces of agile is cross training. And those DevOps engineers should be picking up what the security engineers are doing, and the security engineers should be picking up some more understanding of the CI/CD processes and really what's behind the code and how the applications are architected. So there should be a lot of cross training here on the team. But
yeah, and you
as
know what? I'm sorry
so,
for interrupting. I'm
oh,
very
sorry
sorry.
about that. Yeah, I was just saying, nobody's team has all these pieces. you always have some core strengths and some weaknesses. So identifying those weaknesses are those opportunities for outsourcing.
Yeah, and basically speaking, whenever we speak about whether to outsource or keep in house, one of the first things that comes to mind usually is what's related to sensitive data and critical systems. Because when dealing with highly sensitive data or mission critical systems, you need to maintain control in house. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, it can be crucial. Um, or core competencies, you know, that are central to business objectives or unique. You can actually have unique core competences
Yep.
to your operations. Of course, that's something you might want to keep in house.
Right.
But when it comes to specialized expertise in the field, the areas requiring, specialized knowledge or somewhat advanced skills that are not actually available internally,
Mm-hmm.
and they can be actually effectively managed by outsourced. Examples, like MDR, for example, managed detection and response services, or advanced threat intelligence, specialized security consulting. Outsourcing these functions actually allows to leverage the expertise of real professionals who stay up to date with what they do with the latest threats and technologies. You can also outsource routine and repetitive tasks because
Mm-hmm.
routine and repetitive tasks, basic monitoring, patch management, vulnerability scanning, they can actually be efficiently handled
Mm-hmm.
by external providers. Or, outsourcing can actually provide scalability and flexibility that might be pretty challenging to achieve in house. And like, we have actually a very good slide right here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Mitre matrix, and
Mm-hmm.
basically speaking, there's no attack that's random. Every
Right.
attack is a real key chain, is a real kill chain. You need to consider it and really understand it. And based on this, there's no element in the kill chain you can just throw away.
Right, right. Yeah, you want to hit it as early as possible and break that chain. So those of you who are familiar with MITRE ATT&CK, they have a cloud matrix as well. So you can use, and they have OT, as well. So you can really kind of dig into any kind of attack or threat actor with MITRE ATT&CK and really kind of look under the covers and see what they're doing. And here, kind of highlighted, is a specific attack. But the idea is you don't want it to get all the way to an impact. You don't want to get it to get to lateral movement and collection of data. You want to catch it at initial access or persistence, or when they're trying to escalate their privileges. You want to get it early on in the system, in the that's where everybody imagines catching it. Oh, when the hacker just got into your network, now you've caught it. But reality is, a lot of times it's never caught until there's an impact. And
Yeah,
even people that are monitoring really well, often this is getting missed because there's no malware used, because there's nothing that would actually trigger it. It's really just behavior. And so you need a system that is able to compare behavior against MITRE ATT&CK and against threat intelligence, and really identify, okay, this behavior that looks like normal administrative behavior is actually an attack going on.
yeah. Of course, you want to minimize the dwell time. That's crucial. And actually, you can see the incident timeline right here. This is a good slide. As you can see, it utilizes. It probably spins too fast. Anyways, we've been talking about what you can actually outsource and what you cannot. And one of the things that I mentioned was MDR. And speaking of MDR, this is actually a very good thing because it not only utilizes remote work, which is outsourcing part of what you do, but it also utilizes automation. This is something that people actually overlook a lot of times when they're building their internal SOC teams. And sometimes the companies will be like, we don't need anything like outsourcing our security. We have internal SOC team, and even if your SOC team is there 24/7, even if, let's say you have this, let's say you're very successful at building SOC teams internally, or your DevSecOps team actually handles this, which is something I really doubt, because for DevSecOps team, there's a lot of work to do. And one of the things is that getting all the alerts from all the tools is going to be very, very overwhelming.
Mhm.
And one of the things you can actually do, we're starting to unify actually all the things that we've been speaking about today. You might want to utilize the automation properly in order to kick automated playbooks when something's happening. And this
Mhm.
is where actually you might utilize MDR at its best. Because when MDR is provided, it's not only about having a remote SOC team, it's also about having SOAR in place. It's
Mhm.
also about having automation that's going to take care of very first seconds of an incident, even if it's false positive. So
Absolutely.
um, there's different options of how you can actually cooperate with remote companies, remote teams. And one of them is you can get your SOC built by them. So they will help you with, their support, their knowledge. They will help you configure the tools that you have in place or suggest which ones you need. And this is very good. This can actually streamline the process for you. This can be
Mhm.
very helpful. You can have a co-managed if you have certain tools or you just plan to buy them. In many cases, and I'm absolutely sure you have a lot to say about this, and I will give
Mhm.
you a chance to do so. In many occasions, purchasing a tool, especially such a tool like a SIEM, it's not going to be an easy walk. You're not going to just purchase it, enable it, and have a good sleep. It's not going to happen, is it?
No, 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 absolutely. It's a sim not only takes a lot of resources, a lot of times it's a cluster of servers and a lot of data, you know, terabytes and terabytes of data. So I've built a sim before that took a third of the storage capacity on a SAN. So it can be, very large amount of data that you're having to deal with it. So it's definitely not an easy decision. There's a lot of products out there. There's a few good enterprise products, but once you have that and you've decided, okay, I'm going to deploy Elastic. And so you build a provision an Elastic cluster, and then you're saying, okay, these are the log sources I want. It's a large integration effort to get all of the apps logging properly into the SIM, and then the SIM actually configured correctly. And then, any integrations to a SOAR in order to set up that orchestration, it can be years of work to set all that to get it all set up.
Yeah, and once again, speaking about the SIEM, um, you are purchasing this not
Mhm.
just because you were demanded by the government. You're purchasing this not just because your management told you so. You really want this tool to work for in your favor,
Mhm.
especially if you have a team of specialists in house. They want to receive as pure notifications and alerts as
Mhm.
possible. And SIEM can actually help with that. But you need to properly set up your correlation rules.
Mhm.
Without that, you're going to get overwhelmed easily.
Mhm.
And regardless of the size of your team, regardless of their expertise, they will be overwhelmed. And it's easy to say that okay, you already have a good team, but not easy to hire. And that's a good question mark right there as well.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
And actually, right now you can see an MDR, really top level schematics, how it works. So basically speaking, it utilizes the best out of security practices right these days. One thing is that it collects all the telemetry from the sensors that you have in place. You might have some, you might not yet have some, but it's recommended to install which ones are going to be the best in your case. Um, One of the important steps in MDR is collecting all the data and enriching it
Mhm.
so that you're not just getting the notification from a tool, but you're getting enriched data which comes from all kinds of sources. And by the time it reaches your security specialist or DevSecOps engineer, it already contains as much data in order. It's not a data anymore, it's an information
Mhm.
because you know what to do with it, you know where it leads for, you know where the issue has happened, and you know what assets were actually affected. So you don't have to waste your time going in there performing manual threat intelligence in order to figure out what's going on while a hacker is trying to explore your network.
Mhm.
It's not going to work that way really well.
Absolutely. And even on the proactive part, so if we're talking about threat hunting and things like that, in the DevOps teams and DevSecOps teams I've worked with in the past, nobody is threat hunting. Nobody is doing that kind of a proactive stuff because there's just so much log traffic to deal with, that nobody could do that. But once it's enriched and actually handled by a good correlation system, and actually it has a lot of those rules built in, you can really have automation do a lot of your threat hunting for you. And that is something that is, before it's obvious that there's an attack going on, it can really be digging in and finding out, uh, oh, there is some initial access possibly happening, with this application. And that kind of, intelligence led, information is hard to come by when you're running your own SOC.
Yeah, and in terms of what you're actually willing to outsource,
Mhm.
this is a good question. Are you going to actually pick and choose the right SOAR for your case? Are you going to actually create your own correlation rules for SIEM that you're going to purchase? Are you sure that all the agents are installed properly and you have a pure visibility over the system? This is something that real MDR package could actually help achieve. And in the previous slide that we have, if we can switch to that for a second, please, we have a third option, which is a remote SOC team.
Mhm.
When you have your own computer incident response team and it's in house, it works for you, it's really well. It can be a part of compliance to have one, but uh, the team that you are ordering as a package of an MDR can actually work in your environment,
Mhm.
help you deploy the tools, help you set them up, and either notify your team in case of true positive or actually provide real incident response.
Mhm.
And this is actually very cool. So this is actually where Airiam and UnderDefense are building our main part of the business.
Mhm.
And let's shift to the next one, please. Thank you. So at this point, uh, as you can see, previous one, please, if you can. So the important thing about actually outsourcing this part of DevSecOps job is that your DevSecOps team is not bothered unless it's very needed.
Yep.
They will be notified only when it's important to notify them. They won't get overwhelmed by constant alerts. They won't be overwhelmed by constantly tweaking the SIEM, tweaking the tools in place, and trying to figure out how to actually enrich the data and what to do with all the alerts they have. What were they actually, in your experience, when you have been building some
Mhm.
IR teams? What were the actual reasons when the DevSecOps team uh, headed towards actually going to outsource this part of job instead of their initial decision could be building it in-house?
Yeah, so the big reason for, most DevSecOps teams I've worked with to outsource is, really managing the whole application lifecycle's security, was just too long a life cycle. They were already moved on to the next projects coming in. Yes, every DevSecOps team has responsibility of managing, hundreds or thousands of apps, and they just realized there was a lot of risk for applications once they've actually been deployed, as for ongoing attack, and they're not focused on that monitoring and that threat hunting. And so, when you are picking an MDR service, you have an opportunity to integrate with them with your DevOps tools. So you can say, hey, I want to redeploy these services, if they're under attack, or I want to shut down this load balancer, or I want to shift over to this other region, or you can do all of that through the SOAR tool, through the automation tool.
Yeah.
So you can set up all the orchestration you want in your playbooks as a response, and really, so you have this data going into this SIM, and then those correlations are being built. The SOAR is the orchestration system, and that's really talking to that SIM and saying, okay, so I see an attack coming here, and I have a playbook that says to do this. So those of you who are on the DevOps side, think of a Puppet, or Chef, or Ansible, kind of automation. It's very similar here. It's basically robotic process automation with the SOAR that is taking a response to a security action, and that can be triggered manually by the SOC. If you decide, you say, okay, if the SOC identifies this kind of attack, to redeploy these services, or it can be done automatically. So you can say, okay, if this is identified, if these credentials are identified in the wild, we want to reset all those credentials, delete all these keys, whatever, and so you're launching your tools that way. So there's a lot of when you're working on it, you may realize that there's a lot of tooling you want to build, but you don't have to build it all right away. You can get an MDR provider who has a good SOAR, and already their response is already kind of set up for that, and then work with them and say, okay, we have these applications that we want to have specific actions that we want you to take. If this kind of incident happens, obviously we're the MDR provider is calling and leaving, opening tickets and everything, and giving emails, texts, whatever, but there may be some actual technical response that needs to happen, and those playbooks
Yeah.
are a perfect opportunity to have an incident responded to automatically, services to be recovered and brought back into production. There's a lot of opportunity to do things, and then you could get a forensic report when you wake up in the morning of everything that happened, and really there's been no interruption to your service to your customers, and that's really what the ideal situation for an MDR provider.
Yeah, and basically speaking, coming back to the idea of actually utilizing DevSecOps as possibility to actually implement it as early in the chain as possible. In this case, you're having the automated part do this job for you, and you don't have to worry about when you actually receive the alert because the system has already implemented certain playbooks for you. Okay, and speaking about the MDR part, at UnderDefense, we actually developed our own SOAR in-house, which we customized for the use with our MDR packages. And one of the key things is that you can utilize this with a Maxi platform, which I already mentioned in the beginning of this meeting. You can utilize it as a dashboard for your service, as a one point where you actually unify all your tooling, all your alerts, and it can be a huge accelerator for you. So it's just basically a one-stop shop for SecOps, for compliance, for monitoring, for incident response, and as a part of MDR package, you're getting it.
Absolutely.
Okay, this is basically it. This is the 5 elements we wanted to talk about today. I'm sure some guys have really good questions. Would really love
Yeah.
to hear them from you.
Yeah, let's see if we have any questions. Feel free to dump any questions in the chat.
We have mass is the most popular answer. That's really
Yeah,
funny.
that was great. Awesome. Well, I know I answered the one kind of live.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Siptai, for asking this.
And we have
I'm still waiting for
some hair
Karishma to
care.
actually do. Oh, once again?
We have some hair care questions, but
For sure. We're definitely experts in that. So, we're at 300 people, aiming for 500 soon. Got just 2 security folks. How do I scale up DevSecOps right? This is a good thing because this is the foundation of most of the situations we're observing out there on the market, because this is where everything starts. Most of the companies are starting to actually build their internal teams this way.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've been starting to talk about was how to actually turn DevOps into DevSecOps without just changing the title, but with
Yep.
changing all the tooling and mindset. And in this situation, we can speak like, okay, if we already have a DevSecOps team, which is kind of small, and
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't cover everything, this is where the final part that we've been talking about would be actually useful, because you can outsource most of the stuff that is about to be automated. And with solutions like MDR, you can actually have an automation as a part of MDR. You can actually have all the correlation rules that you need for your CM as a part of MDR. You
Mm-hmm.
can get suggested what tools you need to use, and you can get assistance with the implementation of those tools as a part of MDR. So if you don't anticipate having very large team and very large investments into hiring, and the hiring process, oh, that's another cool story. Hiring so many specialists in cybersecurity. If you don't anticipate this happening anytime soon, you might want to consider having the MDR package for yourself, because
Mm-hmm.
this will not only save you a lot of time and effort, this will actually begin giving you return of investments from the day one,
Yep.
instead of just acquiring knowledge from everywhere and going through threat intel manually every time, making a lot of mistakes, letting hackers in your network. You can start off by having a real solution in place.
Awesome. And I think that, just to build on that really quickly, um, having two people that are security minded on your DevSecOps team is probably enough for most teams, to start out with. So you're probably in good shape. What you're probably wanting to do is really understand what the gaps are in those skills across those two people. What are they good at and what are they bad at? If they're blue teamers, you probably don't want to just have them pen testing. You can outsource pen testing. You can outsource
Absolutely.
vulnerability management. You can do things like that. So I think that we want to really figure out what the strengths of your team are and then outsource the rest.
Yeah, sure. And not only that, because when you're outsourcing stuff like pen testing or teaming, you are engaging with external teams who have very different knowledge and skill base, and uh, the observability and insights you're gonna receive
Mhm.
are gonna be very surprising for you, most probably.
Yep.
Um, and we actually have a question from Siptai once again.
Oh yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah,
staying all the way till the
yeah. Yep.
end for the hair care tips. My hair care tip number one is go all in into cybersecurity. Forget
Yep.
how to sleep. forget about the forget about the hair. This
Yep.
is be it.
Exactly. Yeah. Get a razor to clean up the edges. Yep. That's it. Um, Yeah, and I believe he also dropped a question about cloud identity and entitlements management. So yeah, so especially if you're using a multi-cloud environment or have a kind of a complex identity situation where you have a lot of different whether they're directory providers, a lot of different accounts that you're managing. IAM4, it's super important then. So really, it's helping you. It's basically leveling up your IAM to being a more dynamic solution, and it can be more responsive to dynamic things that are happening, and obviously it'll level up your security hygiene. It'll avoid excessive permissions, things like that. And but
Yeah,
the ideal situation there is really that you are using um, you know that kind of solution in order to get standards across your cloud environment. So really, we want to make sure that you have kind of consistent identity management. You don't want to have, if you're managing, you know 2,000 accounts in AWS, and or subscriptions in Azure, you don't want to have different identities and different permissions and roles across all of them. So that really kind of helps standardize it. But if you don't have a super complex situation, you may not need something like that. You may not need a CyberArk or a solution like that. So it really depends on the complexity of your environment, but it can be useful in managing IAM. So that's, if your user management, if you have a lot of developers, a lot of people on your team, if you're managing a lot of accounts in a lot of situations, it may be a requirement for you. It may be just something that you need just to keep ahead of your identity sprawl.
And you already touched on the over permissioned accounts, which is very good. And it come to my mind that it actually is a good option to automate policy enforcement,
Mhm.
which is gonna be very practical, because from the questions that Sipta asked, I can actually see that he's a very practical guy. He knows what he does, and automated policy enforcement, just what you need in most cases, because it's one thing to constantly implement the policies and train the employees. Still, human error is the major case for most of the hacking activities.
Yep. All right.
Okay, I think this is it. Thank you guys for all the questions that you asked. Thanks for attending. Art, I'm very thankful that you were here with me. Thank you very much. It was a nice talk. I really liked it
Thank
a
you.
lot.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay, guys, thank you for being here with us. Be sure to send us questions anytime you want to. Be sure to send us some DMs. We'll be really glad to talk to you. And have a nice one.